If you're ready to stop building someone else's dream and start creating your own, join our free community, the Self-Directed Network, at acesmanagementinc.com/school. It's where people leaving their W-2s come together to build freedom, purpose, and momentum toward what's next. Welcome to Life After W-2. I'm your host, John Chan. After 17 years in corporate America, I made the leap to build my own business. It was messier than I thought it would be, but also full of valuable lessons I didn't know I needed. This show is about sharing shifts in mindset, pivots in strategy, and personal changes that come with pursuing financial freedom. You're not alone in this. We're all figuring it out, one step at a time. Welcome to Life After W-2. In this episode, Mark Robinson talks about the invisible magnet that pulls you back into old habits and familiar. The safety you think is behind you is not real. It is a mirage. Experience is good, but it was never meant to hold you in the past. We break down how to protect your energy, move away from negative influences, and stay focused on the path that leads to real growth, motivation, and resilience. If you have ever felt torn between who you were and who you are becoming, this one is for you. Let's get started. Mark, so glad to have you.
Thank you for inviting me on the program.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your story and how you transitioned from corporate America to building your own business. So tell us a little bit about your W-2 life.
Well, I've been in the advertising business for about 45 years, and a good chunk of that was at large Madison Avenue ad agencies. Definitely the very, very standard traditional corporate life for a number of years. But, since I was 10 years old, I've always thought of myself as an entrepreneur, and I've always had that as my life objective, not the standard corporate life.
It's funny you say that because I've always kind of had that same feeling deep down inside. But you've had a pretty long career in corporate America. At what point did you decide that I'm going to take a chance on myself?
Back in the mid 1990s, I had been in the business about 25 years, and I figured I had acquired ample experience and seasoning and was ready to go off on my own. I always sort of perceived corporate life as preparation for my own personal ambitions. And I spent about 3 or 4 years really planning every detail of my leap so that when I did finally make the move, I felt totally comfortable with it and totally confident in what I was doing.
Wow, 3 to 4 years of planning. Tell us a little bit about how you plan. So your career was in advertising, and then what was the end goal there?
Well, it was one of my advertising clients that really triggered the move. I was doing a promotion for Coors Light beer, and the promotion was so extraordinarily successful, it really sort of took me by surprise. And I said, there's a hunger out there in the marketplace for a certain kind of phenomenon. And I think I know how to respond to that hunger. I think I know how to give people what they're looking for. And that was the genesis for my company, Heritage Apparel, which was a clothing company that celebrated African American history and heroes. We had done a Tuskegee Airmen promotion for Coors, and that was the spark that said, now's the time to go do this.
Interesting. Okay, so then you got encouragement from outside to just say, go out and do this on your own.
Absolutely. And the first step for me is a process that I call taking inventory, which is to just, really make a detailed list of what do I know that I need to know and what don't I know that I ought to know in order to be ready. What do I have that I need to have? What don't I have? And figure out, how do I fill those gaps? How do I get the stuff that I don't have yet so that I'm totally ready? And that is my preparation process.
So that's really interesting because typically when you're going off and starting something new, we often don't really know what we don't know. So then how did you figure out those items that you didn't know?
I spent a lot of time talking to other entrepreneurs, asking them about their success and failure stories. What was it that caught you by surprise? What was it that caught you unprepared? What do you wish you knew back then? So that I could learn from their experiences.
Really smart. That's what I'm hoping that this show does for other people. Okay, so 3 to 4 years, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, may not seem like a long time, but when you're in it, it can feel like a lifetime in itself because you're preparing for something that's not going to happen for, you know, for 36, 48 months. How do you just hold on to that patience and say, and then how do you get to a point where you know you're ready to make that jump?
Well, it's a big change and transition in your life because you're going from having money come into you from a regular job to a point where that money isn't coming into you anymore. Instead, you're putting money out because to start a business requires a tremendous amount of investment. And that investment, unless you're enormously successful and have investors to back you up, that investment is coming from your own personal savings. So instead of money coming in, it's money going out. And you want to be sure, or at least I want to be sure, that I'm totally ready to do that. And also part of that process is making sure that my wife is ready to do that because you don't go on this journey alone. And if I'm ready to do something and she's not, then that's a recipe for disaster. So I got to know that my partners, the people that matter to me, my life partner, is totally on board with these choices that I'm making.
Yeah, that's really important to have a supportive partner because I mean, I think it can make or break you, really. Uh, yeah. So, all right, you spend all this time, this preparation. So then, at what point do you decide, okay, I'm ready to do this? I've accumulated enough information and knowledge, and now I'm ready to go.
Well, I had one mentor say to me, "You're never going to be ready for life's important changes. You become ready by doing the change." So that really was the final step for me was, okay, I accept the fact that I'm never going to be ready until I actually do it, and that will make me ready. So I went ahead and made the leap. I had another mentor whose motto was feel the fear and do it anyway. And what he meant by that was, feel the fear, know the consequences, know the risks, know the weight of the decision, but don't be afraid of that. Go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I mean, it kind of the closest thing that I can relate that to outside of this world is parenthood. Like you're never going to be ready, but you just do it anyways. You make that decision.
That's right. There's nothing that prepares you for parenthood except doing it.
Right. Okay, so then you make that leap and then you are now off on your own. What are those first 6 months to a year like?
A lot of second guessing, a lot of, okay, I made this decision. Was it a good decision? And really only time will tell. You make a lot of choices and decisions and you just have to kind of wait and see, is this going to work out the way that I thought it would? And fortunately, the majority of those choices and decisions did work out the way I thought they would. Um, but there's a whole chunk of them that don't. And you have to be prepared for that too. You have to be prepared for, I tripped over that rock. Now, how do I keep from stumbling flat on my face?
Yeah. Uh, would you say that it was less chaotic or more chaotic than you thought it was going to be going into it?
Less chaotic. I think fear of the unknown, of not knowing, of not having the experience is always worse than reality. Reality is something that, to say a cliche, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So if it doesn't kill you, you're going to get through this, or you're going to be smarter and more resourceful, and you're going to accomplish at least some of the things that you set out to accomplish.
Yeah. So then I'm assuming you went into the similar industry that you were previously in, or what did you do?
Well, yes and no. I went into the apparel business, a clothing company, and started a line of commemorative clothing. Like we had a line of Tuskegee Airmen apparel with leather aviator jackets and caps and T-shirts and so forth. We had Negro League baseball shirts and caps and pennants and so forth, different things like that. But what I brought to the experience, because I had no knowledge of the clothing business beforehand, was marketing, how to take this idea and get people excited about it. So I brought in somebody who was a really strong, clothing manufacturer that I had done other work with and other promotions with in the past in my ad agency life. And I said, I need you to come in and crank up a factory for me in New Jersey. We made all of our clothing here in the US. That was very important to how we marketed our products because these are all about history and heroes and so forth. So the last thing you want is to have, an overseas label in your clothing. And we did pretty well. I'm very, very proud of what we accomplished. Of course, one of the life lessons was it takes a certain number of years for a company to really get off the ground and be self-sustaining and say, all right, you don't have to keep pouring all of your personal money into it anymore. It's now generating enough money that it keeps itself going. And you know, that's a heavy lift.
Yeah, I mean, in your or in this business model, you have a lot of money going out because you have to pay for inventory, you have to get the space, the machinery, and all that, right?
Absolutely.
So you planned for all of that in the 3 to 4 years,
Yeah.
and then so did it end up being less expensive, more expensive, or about the same?
Way more expensive.
And did it take longer or shorter than you expected?
Well, I have to be totally honest. The company operated for about 5 years and still needed an infusion of cash. And I was at the point where my kids were now in high school. And I had to think about how am I going to pay for college if I'm still pouring all of my money into the business. So I made a decision to pull back and regroup and didn't go back to corporate life, but shut down the apparel company and started my own ad agency. And that was something that didn't require the same degree of capital investment. And I had a long-standing network of contacts and relationships in the business. So was able to get that up and running very, very quickly. And that was a very successful enterprise.
Interesting. Okay, so then that to me makes a ton of sense because you've been in that industry for decades and you have the expertise. So then how I guess that was a much easier transition than it was
Oh
to build
yes,
a business.
yes.
It's okay. And so that's what you're still doing now.
Well, I'm now retired. I retired in the summer of 2023. I'm an old fart, I'm an old guy. So it was time to retire, and now I write books. And I write about my experiences. I write about my career and the business and different things like that. And I very much enjoy writing, which is a form of entrepreneurial craft as well. I'm generating my income through the things that I write. But yeah, up until 2023, I was back in the ad business as my own boss then, and doing pretty well. I was pretty happy with all of it.
Yeah, so looking back at the career, not including the writing, because the writing to me seems like it'd be fun to do, right? You get to just share your story and hope that it impacts others. But kind of looking back at your path, would you still go out and build that apparel company, or would you just have done the ad agency from the start?
I would love to go back and restart that. If I were a younger man, I definitely would. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons from the experience that I could go back and go, okay, I have a few things I would do differently now.
And what would those be?
Bringing in other people's money, getting other people on board with the enterprise at the outset. It can be a very lonely and nerve-wracking thing to start a business solely on your own personal savings and investment, you know. But when you have other people who are invested as well, not only do you have the uplift of shared financial resources, you have the uplift of other people who are emotionally and intellectually invested in the business who want to see it succeed as well.
Yeah, it's very true. Like sharing the load, it can get very lonely when you're trying to build a business, and you have to. I mean, one of the things that I'm going through right now is I was never in marketing. I was just in accounting, but I have to learn social media. I have to understand marketing. I have
Sure.
to understand the attention side of things. So you would bring in investors. Is there anything else you would do differently?
Nothing substantial.
Mhm.
Nothing substantial. I think there were a couple of items that were much more popular than others. So I know now which ones to focus on and which ones were only of modest interest in product selection. I know about product sourcing and negotiating on pricing, been able to make some good deals, learn the hard way.
If you found the right people, would you be open to spinning another version of that company up again?
I would never say never, but again, I've made a conscious choice to focus my time and energies on writing at the
Mm,
moment. So I'd have to give that some thought.
gotcha. Okay. So then I guess the ad agent, going from advertising to building an apparel company and then from apparel company back to an ad agency, What are some of the biggest mindset shifts you've had to overcome?
Mindsets or minefields?
Mindset shifts.
Mindsets.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest challenge is believing you can fall back on your old job. I can always go back to that. That's really not a good path to go down. That is just this magnet pulling you backwards rather than propelling you forwards. That's just this thing saying, all those anxieties that you have, they're real. And you should pay attention to the negative energy rather than the positive energy. And so you have to fight against that. You have to say, no, that safety net that I see in the rear view mirror, it's not real. It's a mirage. That's not safety. That's just experience. And experience is good, but going backwards is not.
That's so interesting. Because when I made that jump, I felt like, yeah, I could just kind of fall back. But then when I sit and really think about it, I don't know if I'd ever want to go back. Not because of anything other than the fact that I just don't like consulting.
Yeah, I think that it would really reshape in a negative way your self-perception and
Right.
how you think about yourself if you fall backwards.
So you think that said going back to a corporate life and maybe not necessarily even giving up on your dream, but maybe putting it on pause to pay the bills, you think that has more harm than good?
I think that if you go back for the wrong reasons, if you go back because it's safe and it's secure and you know you don't have to risk anything, that it does more harm than good. If you go back to say, okay, it's pouring outside and I need to come in from the rain for an afternoon, that's okay. But as long as you have a plan to get back outside. If you don't have a plan to get back outside, then you're hiding from the world.
Yeah, it's very true. I do like that because I mean, one of the things that I've always thought was that, well, I mean, the beginning was like, if you go back, it's shameful. You couldn't cut it. But that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you just use it as it's a means to an end. Goal always
Yeah,
is to build your own business or be financially free. It's just how you're going to get there. Sometimes it's a little bit messier and more
yeah.
chaotic, and you need some stability for a little bit.
Yeah, and I also have to acknowledge that each of us are individuals, and the entrepreneurial life and the entrepreneurial choices are not for everybody. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody would be happy being an entrepreneur, and I don't make a judgment about anybody who makes a different choice for themselves. I have many friends and people that I hold in very high regard who are very successful in the corporate world.
Yeah, everyone has their own path, everyone has their own journey, and it really does depend on what makes that individual happy, and there's nothing wrong with any of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One question I like to ask, which we kind of already talked about, but curious to see if there's any other advice you'd give yourself when you made that decision and started planning to make your exit, knowing what you know now.
Self-care, you know, it's very easy when you start working on a passion project for passion to escalate to obsession. And you start, working around the clock and not giving yourself the kind of self-care and personal support that every one of us needs. And you can burn yourself out because you're now your boss, and there's a real danger of being a terrible boss to yourself. So you have to be a good boss to yourself.
Yeah, I like that because I mean, no one's telling you to stop, but you're constantly pushing yourself because if you have time to go and exercise or have time to go out for a walk, you have time to work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The idea of taking a vacation, feels like a betrayal.
Yeah. Why are you not pushing the business forward? Why are you enjoying yourself? You should be out there going out to achieve your goals. But the problem is that goal constantly changes. Once you get to that one goal, then you have a new goal. And
Yeah.
so I think one book that I really enjoyed, I think is The Gap and the Gain.
Uh-huh.
Uh, yeah, really teaching you how to celebrate the small wins and appreciate, I guess, just appreciate these successes because otherwise you're never going to feel like you've accomplished anything, especially when the goals constantly get bigger each time you accomplish the last one.
Yeah. And speaking of books, I'll plug not one of my books, but a book by one of my mentors. It's called Never Eat Alone.
Oh,
And I think it's a terrific lesson. Never eat alone because that encourages very bad lifestyle choices in terms of isolating yourself and getting into that bad self care, but also because you're always learning when you're with other people. You're observing, you're hearing what their experiences are. That's helping you grow, and it's also helping you build your business network because meeting new people, there are always opportunities there that you might not recognize or see today, but 6 months, 9 months, a year down the road, having met that person becomes a real important relationship that you now have. So, never read alone.
Yeah, I think I've
It's a book by Keith Ferrazzi.
okay. I'll make sure to put that in the description so people have easy access to it. But Mark, I've had so much fun in interviewing you, learning about your story. How can you help people and how can people reach out to you?
Well, you can go to my website, marksrobinson.com, which gives you more information about me. And although I am retired, I do some mentoring for folks in the business and I do some consulting. I have people who are calling me up going, well, I know you're retired, which means you must have lots of free time. So would you help me with this project? Can you advise me on this? So that does happen from time to time. Yeah, and if something sparks my curiosity or my imagination, I will lean in. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. We'll make sure to put that information in the description as well for everyone. And Mark, thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me on the program. I had a terrific time. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode of Life After W2. I'm John Chan and I appreciate you tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who's ready to take control of their financial future. And if you're curious about how self-directed retirement accounts can unlock opportunities in alternative investing, grab our free guide. It's packed with insights to help you get started. The link's in the description. See you next time.